This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have really big news here from Virginia. We have talked about the fact that Virginia kind of presented itself as a surprise addition to the redistricting fight. Can you explain what just happened, what the big news is here as it relates to the prospect of Virginia's maps finally being redrawn?
Yeah, so two big developments. Number one, the Democratic legislature has now passed the new constitutional amendment that will allow them, when it is passed a second time and then voted on by the people of Virginia, to allow them to redraw maps, and that will be in time for 2026. So that is a big win, and that's the first thing that happened. It cleared the first set of hurdles. The other thing is that Republicans filed their first foray of lawsuits, and those fell pretty flat. In fact, so flat that it's fair to say they lost.
Now, in terms of the Virginia situation, can you talk about how the Democrats there were able to maneuver this thing to make it more likely that we would actually see new maps redrawn for 2026? Because this wasn't at all a given.
Yeah, so first of all, if you did not see the first video, it's probably because you have not yet subscribed to this channel. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell to make sure you're alerted when there are new videos so that you don't have the excuse next time of having not seen the first video. But for those of you who didn't, here is the deal. In Virginia, in order to amend the state constitution, which is what has to happen here, is the legislature needs to pass the amendment in two separate legislative sessions, and then it needs to be voted on by the people. So it turned out that Governor Youngkin, the Republican MAGA governor, had called a special session earlier this year, and the Democrats, being cagey and smart, they never closed it. So the special session met, but rather than going what's called sine die, which means the end of it, they just adjourned it. And so they were able to recall that special session, or reopen that special session, and pass for the first time this new constitutional provision that essentially repeals the prior constitutional provision requiring a nonpartisan process. So it has now passed that first time. Now what will happen is in the new year, there will be a second session. Presumably we'll have a Democratic governor, Abigail Spanberger, and we will also have a Democratic legislature again. And so there'll be another session, and when that session begins, Democrats will again pass this same thing, so it'll pass twice. And then they have to wait until April, essentially, for it to be on the ballot, like in California. And if it gets passed by the ballot, then Democrats in Virginia are in business, and then the legislature can enact a new map. So that's how we got where we are. It's not a simple road, but it is proof that if you put your mind to it, if Democrats around the country really bear down and look at every option available, when we hear Democrats say all options are on the table, well, we expect them to look at all options that are on the table, and this is an example of where, the net result of this could be 3 or 4 more Democratic seats.
And so you had mentioned the fact that this was kind of a roundabout way of getting this done, that there would have been, just like in California, a million reasons not to do it, right? It would have been so easy for these Virginia Democrats to say, we can't do it because of X, Y, Z, for California Democrats to say the same thing, and yet both of those states, both of those Democrats are getting it done. And so what does that say for the Democrats in those states where we still have the opportunity to redraw those maps where it hasn't gotten done yet? Like, if we can find some minute provision that would allow us to reopen an adjourned special legislative session in Virginia to squeeze in one of what will ultimately be 2 sessions to amend the Constitution. If we can figure out all that, then what does it say about these Democrats in Maryland, in Illinois, who haven't yet gotten this done, in Colorado, who haven't yet gotten this done?
Yeah, look, I think there is a continuum between very easy to get done and very complicated to get done. I don't think it is fair to say there are states where it can't be done, okay? Like, it may be practically very, very hard, and it may come at a political cost, and it may require challenging the constitutionality of various state laws or even state constitutional provisions. But we have to understand that it is a continuum, but that saying that it is absolutely impossible is really, not, in my opinion, true anyway. I mean, I would have said that it is as impossible. I mean, if you would have asked me 6 months ago where are the places that would fall in the very hard end of the spectrum, like almost impossible, I would have actually listed California pretty high on that list. I mean, when California first said that this was something they were looking at, there were a lot of ideas that were floated. And some of them I actually thought had a higher probability of success than the one that actually the governor settled on. But, to his credit, he muscled that through. And, at that time, if you had said 6 months ago, is it possible to do this thing? I would have said, well, probably not. I mean, you'd have to raise like $100 million. You'd have to come up with a map. You'd have to somehow put a map on the ballot. Like, that's never been done. Like, I'm not sure that.
That's right, Brian. Two big developments today. First, Virginia Democrats have passed the first round of a constitutional amendment that will finally let them redraw the state's congressional maps. Once it's passed again next year, and approved by voters, new maps could be ready by 2026. That's a huge win. And second, Republicans tried to stop it with a series of lawsuits, but those fell completely flat. They lost. Brian. So how did Democrats pull this off? Mark. Smart tactics. Earlier this year, Governor Youngkin called a special session. But Democrats never officially ended it. That allowed them to reopen that same session later, and push through this amendment now. Next year, with a likely Democratic governor and legislature, they'll pass it a second time. Then it goes to the ballot for voters to decide. If it passes, Democrats can draw new maps, potentially gaining 3 or 4 more seats in Congress. Brian. That's impressive. And it shows what happens when Democrats actually use every tool they've got. If Virginia can do it, why not Maryland, Illinois, or Colorado? Mark. Exactly. Nothing's truly impossible, it's about political will. Look at California. Everyone said it couldn't be done, but Governor Newsom got it on the ballot and made it happen. Same story here. When Democrats get creative and determined, they can fight back. Brian. Right, and remember, Republicans have been redrawing maps mid-cycle in Florida and Texas. So if Democrats just play nice, that's not good governance, that's surrender. Mark. Totally. Virginia's current map is 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans. That's already tilted toward the GOP. A fair map would probably be 9-2. But honestly, Democrats could go 10-1 without breaking any rules. That's not extreme, that's just leveling the field. Brian. Exactly, because this isn't about being unfair, it's about survival. If one side fights dirty, and the other side refuses to fight at all, well, you lose democracy by default. Mark. Couldn't agree more. And just look at Colorado, a blue state with a 4-4 congressional split. That's not fair representation. Or New York, where a rural Republican judge forced through a biased map. Democrats in these states need to step up. Brian. Right, and as we head toward 2026 and 2028, this should be a litmus test for every Democratic candidate. Will you fight for democracy, or just talk about good governance while the other side rigs the system? Mark. Exactly. Because good governance isn't about keeping an unfair system in place. It's about making sure voters are truly represented. That's the lesson from California. Outcomes matter more than old-school process. People don't care how the sausage gets made, they care that democracy works. Brian. Well said. Mark, you've been leading this fight from day one, and everyone should be following your work. For those what?
Going to be a question of whether they do a map that adds 3 Democrats or adds 4 Democrats. Okay, adding 5 would be the entire map. That would create an 11-0. Adding 4 would be 10-1. Adding 3 would be 9-2. I think that Democrats should do 10-1. I think they can easily draw a 10-1 map. The districts actually wouldn't look particularly odd. They'd be pretty compact, and it is what I think the national mood calls for right now. Now, I think there are going to be forces in the Democratic Party who are going to say no, only do 3 seats, and make this a 9-2 map. And, I think 9-2, honestly, is what a fair map would be. Like, I want to be clear. Like, I think if you were trying to draw a map that was not partisan gerrymandering one way or the other, you'd probably wind up at 9-2. And that's just, again, because of where the population is in the state and what a fair map would look like, which, like I said, goes to show how far we are from that. I think we should do one tick more than that because of what you're seeing going on nationally.
Right.
I wouldn't be offended, by the way, if you did an 11-0 map. Like, just to be clear, 11-0 map would be fine with me, but I would acknowledge that doing an 11-0 map would require, a lot more work, and there will be people who will simply oppose it. So, to me, the place we have to land here is 10-1, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I think it's important, too, to recognize, like, this is not, the whole situation here is not to find a fair map. I mean, California has an independent redistricting commission. Those were fair maps. New York has independent redistricting. Those are fair maps. Colorado has fair maps. The problem here, the reason that we're talking about any of this is because where Republicans have control, they're not looking to draw fair maps. There's gerrymanders on top of gerrymanders in Florida, gerrymanders on top of gerrymanders in Texas. That's what set all of this off. So I get how people could bristle at the prospect of like, okay, a 9-2 map would be fair, but a 10-1 map is a gerrymander. Yeah, this thing is a response to what Republicans have set off. And again, as I said earlier, we could opt to just continue good governing ourselves into obscurity, or we could fight fire with fire here in the rare instances that we actually do have weapons to wield. I would love to see a fair 9-2 map. I would love to see fair maps in every state across the country. And in fact, I've always supported independent redistricting commissions. I supported it when it was a provision in the For the People Act in 2021, but 0 Republicans voted for it. And so look, if there are Republicans out there who want who see this and bristle because suddenly they're waking up to the depravity of gerrymandered maps, then introduce legislation and get Republicans on board and Trump on board to sign this thing into law. I will be the first one in line to cheer this thing. But the notion that in any way we should hold back when it's already happening, the race to the bottom is happening. So you either fight back or you just capitulate. Those are the only options here. This is a binary choice. So I would love to just defer to the forces of like good governance, but the reality is that's not the opponent that we're contending with right now, and so we can either do nothing or fight back.
That's right. But the reason why I start with what is fair and what is not fair is because I know it matters to a lot of people, but I'd correct like one thing you said. The Colorado map is 4-4. That is not a fair map. Like it is the map that they currently have. I'm not again saying that was a Republican gerrymander, but it's really hard to look at the state of Colorado. I mean, it's got a Democratic governor. It's got a Democratic legislature. It's got 2 Democratic senators.
Right.
It has voted Democratic for president for quite a while. Like, that is a solidly blue state. And how the hell it wound up with a 4-4 map, and that Democrats in Colorado are sitting around being like, yeah, well, 4-4. I mean, like that's actually not even a fair map, right? You could have a debate about whether 6-2 is a fair map in Colorado or whether you should go further than that. But starting with the proposition 4-4 is a fair map is just not true in Colorado. And I'd say the same thing about New York. I mean, let's remember the reason why we have this New York configuration is because the legislature drew a map in 2021 and Republicans went to Steuben County, New York. Okay, for people who don't know New York, you don't know where Steuben County is. For people from New York, you probably still don't know where Steuben County is. Yeah. It is a rural county in the western part of the state, and they went to a Republican judge in this very rural county, and they got him to hire someone to draw a different map, and so that's the map that essentially has formed the baseline. Now, there's been tweaks to it over time here, but that is the fundamental architecture of that map. But if you look at that, there is no chance that looking at the electoral returns of New York, that you would say the current composition of that map is fair. And you would not, by the way, if you looked at how the districts are drawn, it looks like someone drew it who is from upstate New York. It doesn't look like anyone who has any familiarity with communities of interest on Long Island, in New York City, in the outer boroughs, in Westchester and in Rockland and in Putnam and in Orange County. It doesn't look anything like the map that you would draw if you were trying to draw a map that took into account communities of interest. So I do think that as we look at some of these things, like what we even consider to be fair, we have to be open to question because, I'll throw it back to you. Like, Do you think the Colorado map right now represents a fair map for a state that has the voting history?
No, of course not. And I think
so. Where are the Democrats then?
Right, exactly, and that's the right question. Is that I spoke with Governor Polis. He didn't seem especially interested, but I've spoken with Phil Weiser, who is running for governor. He's the current Colorado Attorney General. His position is that we do need to fight fire with fire here. He was absolutely clear about that. I believe Michael Bennett is also going to be running for governor, so I'm going to be speaking with him too, and getting these folks on the record so that we have some indication as we usher in this next generation of Democratic leadership where they stand on these issues, whether they're just going to kind of defer to the tired old optics of like good governance while at the same time allowing Republicans to run roughshod over them. And that has been the issue with Democrats, their unwillingness to fight. And so I think that it should be a litmus test issue as we head toward 26 and 28, that any Democrat who's going to run for office, that especially when they have the ability to fight fire with fire, as these state legislators do, as these governors do, that we make sure to get them on the record, and we know that they're going to actually use their power and not just kind of sit idly by while Republicans run roughshod over our democracy. But look, Mark, you have been...
And let me say two quick things about that. The first is that I actually don't think it is good government or good governance to deprive voters of fair representation.
Yeah.
And I think in some of these states, and I include Virginia, like the state I live in, like I just don't think that right now the map is actually doing the service of the people of Virginia. I think it was drawn by a couple of special masters on the wrong criteria. I mean, I was deeply critical of it at the time, but I don't think the voters of Virginia are benefiting from it. I don't think they're getting better governance. I don't think that they are being more adequately represented in Congress. I'd say the same thing about some of these other states. Same thing, like they're not benefiting. So in what sense is it even good governance? But the second thing I want to say to those Democrats is look at what they did in California. And look at it from a slightly different perspective than the fact that they were able to get this on the ballot initiative. If ever there was a state that believed in what I would call procedural democracy, right? The process of it. It's California, right? I mean, Californians took great pride in the procedure of how they draw maps. Okay, the nonpartisan or the nonpartisan redistricting commission. But what happened is that Governor Newsom, to his credit, ran a public relations campaign. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean in a good way. He presented the arguments why the process was less important than the outcome. Yeah. That the outcome of democracy was more important than the inputs, the process of it. And by the way, Arnold Schwarzenegger raised tens of millions of dollars to argue it the other way. And so the people of California got to consider this. And what's going to happen is a landslide that they would rather have substantive democracy, right? Free and fair elections. They'd rather have that than the process piece. And, on my own podcast, I had on recently John Favreau, and he actually makes this point about the filibuster. Democrats were very committed to the filibuster because it is procedurally fair, right? But his point is people just want the outcome. Right. They want health insurance. Right. They wanted voting rights legislation. And the process, the inside baseball of how that's constructed is less important to people than what the outputs are. And I hope that this redistricting process in California has sort of taught that lesson to Democrats when it comes to a lot of these democracy issues, particularly redistricting.
Well, look, you have been an absolute champion in terms of calling this out from the very beginning and taking an aggressive approach, an approach that more and more Democrats are starting to recognize the virtue of. So again, for people who are watching right now, it's very clear that Mark's voice is one that we should be elevating in this ecosystem. If you're not yet signed up for Democracy Docket, I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'll also put the link to this channel on the screen as well. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.